saw that as it happened last week. If you're watching this market, and it was an important moment, and so it confirms that that is a peak of the 40-week cycle. So we know that the 40-week cycle is moving downwards. What else does that price cross tell us? It in fact provides us with a projection for price. Okay. Now, how do we calculate that projection? Very simple. We read the level of the peak, which I'm going to do very roughly now, and you would probably know much better than I do what that level was, but it looks like it was about 44.40. Let me write that down there. It was somewhere around about 44.40, if I am reading my chart correctly. We don't have to be very accurate with this, and I've frozen the screen on the wrong FLD. Sorry, I'm working with the new version of Sentient Trader that automatically switches FLDs according to what you're looking at. There we go. I want the median. There we go. Okay, FLD based on the median price, and so there we go. The peak was 44.40. The price cross occurred on Wednesday of last week. I do hope that on Wednesday of last week all our Sentient Trader users in Australia witnessed this occasion. Steve's asking how would we have interpreted the 40-week FLD price cross in March. That's an interesting question, so we'll get back to that in a moment. Let's just finish this little discussion here. So there's our price cross. That price level was at about 42.20. Okay, 42.20. I'm just using rough approximate prices. Okay, so therefore you need to calculate your projection. The first thing you do is you calculate the difference between those, a very simple mathematical question, and so therefore it projected price down to a level of 4,000. Okay, now price almost came down to that level, as you can see, only a few days later. So perhaps that you might think that was not really a particularly useful or interesting projection. However, there are a few things to be said about that projection. First of all, it's a projection for the 40-week cycle. Okay, it's a projection downwards for the 40-week cycle. Projections should be adjusted according to underlying trend. So in fact, this projection of 4,000 is not the true projection. The underlying trend, and I've already spent time calculating it, so I won't do it again, but we've already calculated the fact that the underlying trend is strongly downwards. Therefore, we expect this projection to be overshot. In other words, we expect price to move further down than the level of 4,000. Okay? And so that's the first thing. We expect price to go a lot lower. Secondly, that projection is for a price of the 40-week cycle. So now that means that we expect the 40-week cycle trough to form below a level of 4,000, and given the strength of the bearish underlying trend at present, and various other things, it wouldn't be a mistake to suggest that in fact price will use a Fibonacci ratio for that projection, and Fibonacci ratios is something I'm not going to start talking about too much in detail now, but you use Fibonacci ratios, and so I often use a Fibonacci ratio of 3 to 5. So if that was a Fibonacci ratio of 3 to 5 because of the bearish underlying trend, then you divide 200 by 3, you get about 70, multiplied by 5, you get about 350 or something like that. So in fact, we're projecting to below 3,900. So we're projecting the price to move all the way down to there. What's the other thing that we can say about the price crossing that FLD? We can look at the pattern that the FLD is making in price, and I would like to point out the M-shaped pattern that the FLD has itself already made in price. And as I mentioned yesterday, when you get a trough of the M-shaped pattern in an FLD on a long cycle, that gives you a very good estimate for when that trough is going to form. So using this estimate, I would estimate that in fact we might be looking at early July for the trough of the 40-week cycle. Okay, that sort of wraps up that discussion. Let me, instead of looking at the Nasdaq, let me answer Steve's question, because that is a very interesting and useful question. How would you interpret the 40-week FLD cross in March? So let's do that. The first thing to notice about the FLD cross in March is that there was not one FLD cross. There were many of them. Okay. Now, the FLD cross that I've just spoken about is a beautiful example of a single FLD cross. In other words, price crosses the FLD once. And in a perfect and ideal market, and when the cycles are clear and when they stand out, which happens often, sometimes people say to me, "Oh well, you keep saying in a perfect market, but a perfect market never happens," and that's not true at all. Very often, markets behave perfectly. But sometimes price crosses an FLD not once, but many times. And Hurst actually devoted quite a lot of his cycles course to a discussion of exactly that behavior. So what you do is, and Steve has asked about the FLD cross in March, the first thing to point out is that there were in fact many of them. And so when you're looking at an FLD cross, you have to go back to look at all the FLD crosses that have occurred since the most recent trough of that cycle. Okay, so when was the trough of the 40-week cycle? The trough of the 40-week cycle was in October of last year. When was the first price crossing of the FLD cycle, of the FLD for that cycle? It was here. There's the first cross of price. Price jumped up above that FLD. Now, Sentient Trader does this for you, actually, so you don't have to do this if you're working in Sentient Trader. But obviously, if you're using Hurst cyclic principles manually, and I would strongly encourage that, then you should. This is the process that you follow. So, price crossed above the FLD at that point. Okay, as a matter of interest, projecting a target that in fact proved to be quite an accurate target for the peak of the 40-week cycle. I won't do all the calculations now, but it did in fact produce a fairly good and accurate target. However, a few weeks later, price crossed below that FLD over here. Okay, and then if we plotted a median line, you might see, and let me be absolutely accurate about this, another cross there, and then another cross there. Okay, then price stayed below the FLD, then it crossed above it there. Okay, then it crossed below the FLD there, and then it crossed above it over here, and below it over here, and above it over there. Now, that is an extremely complex multiple price cross of FLD. I don't have time. My time is up in today's Trader Chat. I don't have time to go into great lengths about that. But I can tell you that very simply, the process is that you look at all those points, all the circles that you've drawn. Sentient Trader uses a mathematical process to find the exact median point of all of those points on your chart. But you can do it very simply by eye. And before I developed Sentient Trader, I did this often, and you can do it very easily. Where's the midpoint of all of those points on your chart? I would say it's about there. I don't know if you'd agree with me, but I'd say the midpoint of all those FLD price crosses is about there. Okay, Sentient Trader calculates it to within 6 decimal places on your chart. So if you've got Sentient Trader doing this for you, then it will do that. But you can just do it very easily by eye. So how do you interpret, as Steve asked, how do you interpret the FLD cross of price that occurred in March? Well, you look at all of them. Don't leave any of them out. Every single one of them must be counted. And then you develop, you do your projection from there to here. And where does that go? It goes pretty much perfectly to your peak over there. I think you can see that. There's a textbook. I wish I wish I could take a snapshot of this. That is a textbook multiple price cross of FLD projection, which looks as if though it in fact achieved that projection almost perfectly in price, because it was what was that about? That was about from 39.60 up to the price cross at about 41.30 is 270 points, and you add 270 points to 41.30 gives you a price of about 4,400, which is pretty much where that projection took us to. Okay, so that is a perfect example of an FLD price projection that really works. A lot of people have said to me, oh gosh, FLD price projections don't really work. I can tell you after years of doing this, FLD price projections are extraordinary. They work very, very well. However, they are not always simple, as I've just demonstrated to you. Everybody wants everything to be simple. They always want it to be price crosses the FLD once. Okay, price projections aren't simple. I know it took me several weeks or months, I don't know how long. It took me a long time to get Sentient Trader to do that properly, but there we go. So if you start doing that, you will be able to make those projections for yourself manually. It is, as a matter of interest, often why Sentient Trader is projecting projections that don't seem to make sense with single price crossing of FLDs. Not many people are very experienced at calculating and performing multiple price crosses of FLDs, and we have a tendency always to try to simplify things to make it easy, which is why it's something we don't speak about very much. Well, my time is up. Thank you very much for joining me on today's Oz Trader Chat. I do hope you found it interesting. Thank you very much for your interest in Sentient Trader and in Hurst cyclic principles. And I hope you have found it enlightening. Certainly take care in the Australian markets over the next while. No matter what the media tell you, I don't believe the 40-week cycle trough has come in, and we are looking at a bearishly shaped cycle over the next 10 weeks or 9 weeks. So thank you very much for your time. I do look forward to seeing you all again next week. If you have anything particular you would like me to speak about in this Trader